coffee and today's guests here with me, so we're ready to roll. Welcome to our Circular Coffee Break podcast, where we will be talking about everything circular and beyond. Now, as always, we're very eager to provide you with a fresh perspective to the ongoing conversation about circular economy and sustainability. And that's what we're basically trying to do with every new guest and every new episode. We already heard from some of you with your feedback, ideas for future guests, and suggestions for future episodes. But please keep the feedback rolling. So you can visit our website, www.circularcoffeebreak.com, or drop us a line at circularcoffeebreak@gmail.com. So let's keep the conversation rolling. Give us your feedback if you have ideas, thoughts. Always eager to hear that. Now, grab your coffee or tea if you prefer, get comfortable, and let's start the conversation. Today, we will be talking about the World Circular Economy Forum, which is a global initiative that brings together over 4,000 business leaders, policymakers, and experts to present the world's best circular economy solutions. It actually aims to create a new economy, businesses, jobs, leveraging circular solutions to solve the planetary crisis. The World Circular Economy Forum first took place in June 2017 with roughly 1,600 participants here in Helsinki, Finland. And it was organized by Sitra. And for those of you not familiar, Sitra is the Finnish Innovation Fund. Since then, the World Circular Economy Forum has taken place annually in places like Japan, the Netherlands, Canada, Rwanda. And this year, the event was held from the 15th to the 18th of April in Brussels, Belgium, co-organized by Sitra and Circle Economy Foundation, an international organization that aims to empower industries, cities, and nations with practical and scalable solutions to implement the circular economy. Our guests today have been playing an important role in making this year's World Circular Economy Forum a reality and in bringing together key decision makers to discuss about the shift towards a sustainably circular world. So my guests today, first Reetta Kohonen. She's a specialist sustainability solutions at Sitra. She's part of Citra's team that promotes the carbon neutral circular economy internationally. And she works with the World Circular Economy Forum already for the last 4 years. She's actually spending her days thinking about how to transition international business communities and policies away from the outdated linear operating models. Reetta is a graduate of the Aalto University School of Business, where she specialized in the solving of environmental and sustainability challenges, as well as multidisciplinary teamwork. In addition to her work on the circular economy, Reetta gets her energy from hiking in Finnish nature, intense gym workouts, and playing the violin in the symphonic orchestra. Our second guest today is Hatty Cooper. She's Director Strategy and Impact at Circle Economy Foundation, a non-profit impact organization based in Amsterdam. Hatty leads a portfolio of high-impact initiatives focused on enabling public and private sector decision makers to turn circular ambitions into action to tackle global challenges, including, for example, climate change, social inequality, and resource scarcity. Before joining Circle Economy, Hatty worked in sustainable development in South Asia, Sub-Saharan Africa, and the Caribbean for the UK Civil Services. She is a member of the Strategic Advisory Group for the UK's National Interdisciplinary Circular Economy Research Programme, which is focused on realizing the UK's potential to grow and prosper sustainably by transitioning to a more circular economy. Welcome to the show, Reetta and Hatty. Reetta, to get us started, I mean, the World Circular Economy Forum has become an important event on the annual calendar. I mean, specifically for those of us focusing on the transition towards a circular economy. Could you maybe provide us with a short history of the event? I mean, as mentioned, the first one took place in 2017 in Helsinki. And since then, it has basically been growing, developing, and traveling around the world. And as I understand, the next one in 2025 will take place in Sao Paulo in Brazil. And I'm sure the planning for that has already started. What was the initial idea behind the event, and how has it evolved?
Well, thanks, Michael, and thanks for having us on your show. The roots of the World Circular Economy Forum are kind of both Finnish and global at the same time. So my colleagues had this idea when Finland was about to celebrate its 100th independence year, that they want to do something to showcase the sustainable and circular developments that were ongoing in Finland. And the timing coincided with the Finnish government actually developing the world's first national circular economy roadmap and strategy, work which Sitra was leading. So therefrom came the idea to bring together the key players and the communities that are already working on the circular economy and basically enhancing that transition. But as I said, the roots are also global and not just to celebrate Finnish, achievements. And it was, as per my understanding, I wasn't working here yet at that time, but the interest was way bigger than my colleagues had expected. And like I think you mentioned, we had 1,600 people the first time coming to Helsinki. So yeah, that was a great success and meant that right the year after, we were able to take the forum to the other side of the world, to Yokohama in Japan, and the road has continued ever since. We have a big wait list of countries that want to invite us on their turf and to share the developments in different regions.
Well, excellent. Yeah, I still remember the event in 2017. I was lucky enough to actually be there. And I think back then it was actually still new. I mean, it was fantastic to actually have the possibility to discuss with people from other countries around circular economy and people actually understanding what you mean when you say the words circular economy and sustainability. Because back in those days, I think it wasn't as common and as understood as it is today. Now, Hatty, this year, Circular Economy Foundation was a co-organizer of the World Circular Economy Forum in Brussels. And Circular Economy Foundation actually is really active in the area of circular economy, actually, I guess, globally in Europe and globally. Now, what was the main motivation of Circular Economy Foundation to become part of the event, to become part of the World Circular Economy Forum?
Well, hello, everyone. And Michael, thanks so much for having us both on this morning. I think you've summed it up perfectly in saying that in 2017, the whole concept of the circular economy felt like it was relatively new, that it was relatively innovative. And in the past 5 years, we've really seen the volume of discussions, debates, and articles around the topic on circular economy has, quadrupled. But despite this, we also know that circularity has been steadily declining. Through our Circularity Gap report, we've also illustrated in the past couple of years, our global economy has decreased from 9.1% circular to 7.2% circular in the same time frame. And we know that our global economy is consuming faster than ever, 500 billion tons of materials in just 5 years. So despite all of that, what we've also seen is that the topic of the circular economy is growing exponentially in terms of the volume of people that are attending the World Circular Economy Forum, the number of people that are talking about circular economy as a means to achieving a more sustainable world. And I think that's why we really wanted to be part of this debate. And we're really grateful for Sitra to inviting us to the room to be part of this debate in Brussels. Because what Sitra and the World Circular Economy Forum have done so well is bring together policymakers, business leaders, SMEs, and different organizations working in the space to build consensus, because we know that there's an ambition there. We know that there's a lot of appetite to adopt circularity, but we're not seeing that happen on the ground as fast as it needs to happen. And that's why we at Circular Economy wanted to be part of this conversation and also to support the forum in its development.
Perfect. Thanks, Hatty. And you mentioned the Circular Gap report. I mean, it's really great to see how that has developed as well. I mean, I remember a couple of years back, it was kind of an insider document that you would discuss in circular economy circles. And nowadays it has actually become, I would argue, a global reference point, and you see it pop up in a lot of discussions where people are referring to it to talk about the development of circularity, but also the gaps that we still see being very wide in many areas.
And I think that's also what we're trying to achieve through the Circularity Gap report, is also really break down the complexity behind the circular economy and translate that into a language that really anyone can pick up the report or look at the insights and understand how it would apply to their sector, to their daily life, to their government policy, and then also take some steps towards helping to accelerate that transition.
Yeah, absolutely. Now, you mentioned quite a couple of stakeholders like businesses, regulators, as well as other parties. Reetta, organizing an event of this size, and the World Circular Economy Forum naturally covers a lot of ground, a lot of different topics, has a lot of different speakers from very many areas, from government to businesses to NGOs and so on and so forth. So what were your guiding principles in organizing the event, in setting the themes that you wanted to cover, selecting the speakers to invite, and what were the goals you were looking to achieve?
Right, thanks. So while the overall, long-term goal of the forum is to inspire and to keep these conversations going, we naturally each year have shifts to reflect the changing conversations and the continually updating policy space. So maybe the most important thing for us is to remember that the forum is a global platform where our guiding principle really is to involve as many of those international partners as we can and give them ownership of parts of the program. And in a way or other, this is one of the recurring goals. Sitra doesn't dictate the program by ourselves, but we really trust and rely on those partners and alliances across the globe to bring the relevant conversations to the stage for the rest of the world to see. So I would say that that's kind of the number one goal each year, and something we have to remember to keep it relevant. Now then, this year, thanks to our two co-organizers, I mean, yes, we worked with the Circular Economy Foundation, but we also had a really strong science basis from the International Resource Panel. So kind of the new aspect that we wanted to bring in this year was to actually build the program more strongly on the science, on the latest figures, and on the latest recommendations for policymakers, for businesses and business model development. So our kind of written out goal internally was to promote these very targeted discussions across these certain leverage points that build or make up our economy. So we have governance, we have finance, we have businesses, and we have kind of employment and the civil society issues. And now that is naturally, as I said, the makeup of our society. So that doesn't change much from year to year. But this year, kind of, we took those insights a bit deeper and a bit more seriously, and looked at what are the conversations that need to be had, looking at the science and reflecting on that, on how to go forward in these different arenas. I also referred to the international nature of the event. So taking the forum to Brussels right after Helsinki, we had to play this balancing act of how to keep everything and the conversations and topics relevant to a larger audience, now being in Europe twice in a row. So one concrete way to achieve this balance was to instruct and guide all of our partners to include voices from the global south in all of the conversations as much as possible, so that we don't become too global north centric. So that was really important this year. But I keep talking about a balancing act. There are really important elections going on in Europe in this just this June, which is why we decided to host the forum in Brussels right after Helsinki, because Europe is at a crossroads in its sustainability agenda, and we and our circular economy enthusiasts see the need to keep the circular economy on the Commission's and on the Parliament's agenda and not let go of the developments that have been seen in Europe so far. So that's a reason for being and having that presence in specifically Brussels this spring. So all of really big things, important things, but also, as you may know, the WCEF brand, we go for colors, we go for jokes here and there. The final goal is always to keep it inspiring and encourage this kind of participatory spirit for our audiences, enhance and enable networking for as much as possible. So that's a general list of the goals that we were going after this year.
Thanks, Reetta. And I think you could see that throughout the panels. The diversity was great to see. I mean, from the different stakeholder groups, but also people from youth organizations, people from governments, from all around the world. So I think it's important to do all of that. And I mean, forums like the World Circular Economy Forum is naturally, to some extent, the official program, but it's also naturally to enable the unofficial discussions, the casual discussions that happen most likely in a coffee break between policymakers from the global south with the global north, youth organizations, and so on. Talking about that, Hatty, looking back at the events, I mean, what were your main takeaways? I mean, anything specific from the various panels, presentations, the face-to-face interactions you took away and you remember of the event?
I think maybe building on what you've both said, the forum at large was extremely participatory and very inspiring and extremely energizing. I think that at the moment we're bombarded with negative news, whether it's looking at the climate crisis, looking at current geopolitics. And I really felt in the forum a huge amount of energy geared towards solutions for many of the challenges that governments are facing globally. And building on that, I also think that the representation that was showcased in the various panels, but also in the breadth of topics that we were discussing, from how we finance the circular transition to how we ensure community stability in the face of, mining critical raw materials and the energy transition, really looking at such a broad spectrum of elements of how we integrate the circular economy into a more sustainable future for the globe at large. And for me, I found that extremely energizing. And also, at Circular Economy Foundation, we're talking every day to a lot of people who already have drunk the Kool-Aid when it comes to circular economy. And I also think during the forum, of course, a lot of people in the room believe that the circular economy is the way forward, but some people don't. And I found it, again, incredibly motivating to also speak to those people who perhaps are not so bought into the topic of the circular economy, who don't really understand how it fits within their sector. Hoping to convince them otherwise. And I think in terms of kind of the standout elements for me, well, you've also both mentioned it, the networking, the ability to be in the same room as people. I think we're still in the hangover of COVID and the separation that brought. And you can never underestimate what it is just to have 5 minutes having a coffee and talking to your peers. But for me, the two kind of standout topics that really have been rolling around my brain since we left Brussels was, one, talking with the multilateral development banks and other national banks, in that there is a lot of financing available for the circular economy, but there is still a big gap between the money and viable circular projects, and how we bridge those two elements globally. And that's what we at Circular Economy Foundation are working very hard to do with the European Investment Bank, with the Inter-American Development Bank and others. And the second element was the just transition. So how can the transition towards a circular economy is just? And we've talked about the dimensions between what's going on in Europe, what's that legislative environment, the impacts that legislative environment will have on the world, but also how we really bridge the gap and ensure that there is a constant narrative between the developments in the global south and the global north, and also supporting each other in that transition. So for me, those two big elements were so front and centre in the forum, and really in the past have been not afterthoughts, but perhaps haven't had the main stage. And I think that was really important for us to highlight those two dimensions.
Absolutely. Thanks, Hatty. I think very, very interesting reflections you have there. And I think it's spot on. I mean, it's getting into gear, starting projects, using the money where it has the most impact, and do it in an inclusive and equity-driven way, so that everyone basically sees the upside of this transition and is not left behind. So absolutely. Reetta, from your point of view, any reflections or any key takeaways?
Sure, yeah. I mean, thinking of this just transition question is one that also was really stuck with me. And the overall feeling that I have from the big picture of the program is there were a lot of kind of these, well, unfortunately, juxtapositions sometimes of like, yes, you want to enable the transition, but it's so difficult to make it socially fair when you have increasing, national security questions, geopolitical issues. So several conversations highlighted these discrepancies, if you will. Similarly, well, this is not a new conversation per se, but there are so many comments on the need for policy to take us forward and guide us forward. But no, wait, but we should actually listen to and go after the first movers of the businesses and the entrepreneurs. So that's also one kind of this balance question that keeps coming up and was prevalent throughout the program this year. One more is, I already mentioned this wish for us to enable globally relevant conversations, but then it's so important, but also so difficult to come to global and international agreement on almost any topic, but with these sustainability and circularity questions. While then, when you want to make those developments, you always need to remember the local conditions and the local skills and the local differences and capabilities. So it's a lot of big questions like that that just repeat year after year. But luckily, we did have a lot of case examples from around the world, from businesses, from certain cities, for example, on their urban planning processes, to kind of balance that out and showcase that that change is already happening. But all the while, like I also said, we want to inspire, we want to showcase all the positive things that are already going on. I'm really happy to see that we did also hear kind of those critical voices saying that, well, of course, criticizing the linear economy and how that's really, global north focused and heavy, but just highlighting the coming back to this just transition, highlighting the need to be mindful and to also realize or understand the risks that may come in this circularity transition. It's not all dancing on flowers. It's also heavy geopolitical questions of securitization, peace building, national interests. So we had really big conversations this year. Some of them for the first time on stage, which we're really happy about and happy to see how those develop in the further future editions.
Oh yeah, absolutely. I mean, the shift towards a circular economy, it's a major systemic change that we're talking about here on a global level, and I guess our very often still present winner-loser mentality. So one can only win and all others need to lose. That approach doesn't really fly here. If you think about the change that we're looking at on this systemic level, we basically are doing open heart surgery while the system is running, and that's never easy. So I think very good reflections you had on the event, and I think it came through in the panel discussions, in the interviews, and also in many of the side events. To be honest, that is the dialogue we need to have at the moment around the topic. Now, let's maybe dream for a moment. If we look back at the World Circular Economy Forum 2024 in some months, let's maybe say a couple of years. And there would be a headline saying, and this is what the World Circular Economy Forum 2024 enabled, or this is what it triggered. What would you hope that headline would say? What would you like to see as the most significant achievement and most lasting impact from the event? Maybe also based on the discussions you've had at the event. Reetta, what's your thought?
Well, with the forum, we want to inspire people. I would love to see, headlines saying how certain politicians were there. They met their subjects, if you will. They met the people whose daily life and whose work their decisions affect, and they realized the value in kind of taking those leaps of faith in the circularity transition. I would love to see interviews from the civil society, from people in the streets, finally understanding the harmfulness of the current linear system, and the masses buying into the science that for decades has been telling us to make the change.
Cool. Hatty, what's your dream? What does your dream headline look like?
I mean, it's a great question, and I think it all comes back to your point about the fact that we're trying to imagine this, or trying to enable, not imagine, we've already imagined it, this enormous systemic shift. And I think what the forum does so well is enables this global conversation, because we know that the circular economy transcends borders, it transcends belief systems, it transcends sectors. Really, it is this universal approach to imagining a whole new way of working for all of us. And what I would love to see the forum reflected back in, let's say, a couple of months, let's not say years, let's hope it's sooner than that, is that we had such heavyweights in the room. The fact that we have government ministers, commissioners from the European Commission, from leaders of industry in one room, who have many other competing demands on their time, putting the circular economy as a focus front and centre. And I would like to see them working together, because as we've discussed, this is a systemic change. This really transcends policy, etc. I would like to see this universal and collective ambition pooling together, and that weight of these different entities pushing together. So as Reetta said, civil society members, politicians, supranational bodies. I think where we can convene more and build consensus together, we'll move forward in a much more impactful way. And that's what I don't hope, because I believe that the forum is achieving this and will continue to achieve this. So yeah, in a few months, let's see where that translates to.
Cool. Yeah, no, I fully agree with you on that. I mean, what the forum naturally does is a topic that's normally one among many on the list of politicians and business leaders. It puts the topic in the pool position for a couple of hours, for a couple of days, and basically with that enables a dialogue that otherwise might get lost among all the other topics on the agenda, and hopefully then progresses the topic also going forward. Now, unfortunately, the coffee is empty and it's time to wrap up the episode. But before we leave, Reetta, maybe a question to you. I mean, the forum has been reaching thousands of people. Like in Brussels, you had roughly 1,500 live participants in the room and nearly 10,000 online for the main event as well as the many side events. Now, what's next? I mean, next year the forum goes to Sao Paulo. What is the long-term vision? Where do you want to develop the World's Circular Economy Forum, and what's the big target?
The big target is a world where we don't need the forum anymore. The big target is a world that is circular. But we know that that's quite far ahead. So operationally, we are taking 12 months at a time. Of course, we, as I said, we do have a long list of countries waiting to host the forum. But on a daily basis, the work continues now to indeed build that next forum in Brazil, in Sao Paulo, for the first time, jumping onto the Latin American continent, which is really exciting. We'll get to hear many perspectives on economies that have their own characteristics. Now that the program planning is in really early stages, but I would imagine that we'll see a lot of conversations about forestry, about bioeconomy, industries that are dominant over there. And we are actually partnering with Fiesp, the Industrial Federation of Sao Paulo. So I trust that through them and their networks, we'll have an even stronger business and industry representation, both in the participants and in the speakers and the topics that we'll cover. And well, importantly, the conversation will look a bit more Latin American, with new insights, but the work continues to ensure that it's relevant for a global audience, and that other nations again learn one from the other. I don't know, Hatty, as your organization has worked on the continent, you have a gap report done with them. If you have any maybe expectations for our side as well, like what do you want to see on the stage in a year?
Yeah, great question. I think so. Bringing more representation from indigenous groups. So I think in Brussels at the forum, what was fantastic was that we had a lot of very high level representation. And I think what we want to make sure in the forum for next year in Brazil is also marrying all the different dimensions of those representative groups on the stage. And I think we would love to see some more of that indigenous wisdom coming to the stage and represented in Brazil.
Thanks a lot, Reetta and Hatty, for joining me today. Really interesting insight into the World Circular Economy Forum, which, as mentioned earlier, I think is one of the top events that basically draws attention to the topic of circular economy and enables conversations that otherwise might not take place. So definitely a very important contributor to our transition to circular economy. Thanks, Reetta. Thanks, Hatty.
Thank you.
Thanks so much.
For all of you listening out there, as always, we hope you found today's episode interesting and inspiring. If you like the podcast, you can help us out growing the Circular Coffee Break community by giving us a 5-star rating and a positive review on Apple Podcasts, Spotify, or whatever other podcasting platform you're using. As mentioned, we're trying to bring the gospel of circularity to more people out there to basically educate and talk about the topic. So would be great if you could help us reach more people and get the message out there. Also, please remember to subscribe to stay in the loop on new episodes. We have a lot of great future guests already lined up. So really make sure that you are there when the episodes drop every 2 weeks. With that, all for me left is to thank you all for listening today, for tuning in, and I'm looking forward to seeing all of you here at the Circular Coffee Break podcast.